What is going on, Chess YouTube? It is that time. We're looking at the first game of the finals of the 2025 Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tournament. Here we have Vincent Keymer, the German Grandmaster, facing off against Fabiano Caruana, the American Grandmaster. This game was insane. Let's dive right in. All right, in the game, it is freestyle chess. White has a very interesting starting position. We have the bishop on the A1 square on the long diagonal, the king on D1, the rooks in between, and of course, those knights on the H1 and G1 squares. Now here, how does White want to start? The strongest moves for White in the starting position include C4, B4, E3, Knight F3, and Knight to G3. So which one will Fabiano go for? He goes for 1C4 in the game in the spirit of the English opening, and that pawn on C4 is being supported by the rook on the C1 square, and this is the same starting move that the GOAT Magnus Carlsen played in his game as White. Now here, Black goes Knight to F6 instead of, say, C5, trying to go for a symmetrical pawn structure. Now, this move Knight F6 is a little bit weak, and already on move 2, White is going to have a couple of ways to fight for a very large advantage. One is the move E4. That pawn would be supported by the queen on B1 and the rook on E1, therefore Black can't take it. And the other is simply F4 in the spirit of the bird's opening. Now, instead of those options here, Vincent Keymer staying very solid, he does go Knight to F3, and even in classical chess, he is a big fan of the opening moves C4 and Knight F3. This guy plays a lot of flank openings as White. Now here, Black obviously has the option of going C5, clamping down on the queen side and trying to head for more of a symmetrical-ish position. But instead, Fabiano Caruana, he does love to mix things up in the opening. And here he does go B6, activating his light squared bishop on the A8 square. That bishop is very well placed. However, Black is not really fighting for the center of the board yet, and Vincent Keymer is going to have the chance to seize control of the center, perhaps with E4 or D4 or B4 and so on. In the game, B4 was the move by Vincent Keymer, also opening up the scope of his dark squared bishop on this diagonal, hitting the knight on F6, and also clamping down on any sort of future C5 advance from Black. Now here, Fabiano, he does go C5. Of course, that pawn is more than defended by the pawn on B6 and the rook on the C8 square. Now here, Vincent Keymer, this is a very critical point in this game, and already on move 4, he heads for a really bizarre opening idea that you would, never really see in classical chess. It's really, really bizarre. If you like puzzles, pause the video and try to find the 3-move sequence played by Vincent Keymer right here in this position. And while you're at it, go and smash that YouTube like button for more videos just like this one. All right, here, the strongest move according to the engine is simply E4, gaining space, and B takes C5 is also not bad. However, instead, in the game, Vincent Keymer, he plays a really weird Zwischenzug move, Bishop E5, hitting the queen on B8 with a gain of tempo. Now, where is that queen going to go? The only square it can go to is B7. Keep in mind, that bishop is being supported by the knight on the F3 square. Therefore, B7 would be the only real square, but that is a very awkward square to move to. You block in the bishop on the A8 square. Instead, here, Black goes D6, blocking the attack, but now Vincent Keymer, he spots the idea. You can actually take on F6 and then take the pawn on the H7 square. So he goes bishop takes, then E takes, and then queen takes H7, a very powerful sequence, and now he is up a single pawn in this position. And now, very importantly, I want to point out, if White just took on F6 without going bishop E5 first, forcing out D6, if Black had that pawn on D7, that would actually be much better for Black. His queen and his bishop would be way more active, if I can draw arrows correctly here, and Black would be doing just fine. But with that pawn on the D6 square, it blocks in both the bishop and the queen, and White can safely grab that extra pawn here. Now, of course, the knight on H8 is under attack by the queen. Black is going to have to go knight G6, getting his knight out into the game. And now White here is officially up a pawn out of the opening. However, his queen on H7 is definitely out of the game for now, and Black may be able to get some sort of counterplay before White can stabilize. All right, now here, White, it is his turn to move. In the game, E3 is chosen by Vincent Keymer, supporting the pawn on C4 and activating his light squared bishop on the king side. Now here, Black takes on B4, C takes B4, regaining that lost pawn. Of course, that pawn on the B4 square is likely going to be lost sooner or later. Here, white continues bishop e2, developing his bishop, and here black makes a very critical mistake out of the opening. He goes rook to c5. Now, this looks very active. You are threatening potentially rook h5 ideas later in the game, and you are guarding that h5 square in general. However, this move is simply premature, and white is going to have a few different ways to fight for the advantage here. Instead, the computer loves the idea of knight to e5, centralizing your knight and putting a lot of pressure on that knight on the f3 square. Instead, rook c5 played in the game, and here white has the chance to just go d4, gaining space in the center and driving back that knight, and that rook, and it's not really obvious after d4 where that rook on c5 would be going to. Instead, knight g3 was played in the game by the German Grandmaster, and here Fabiano goes queen to c7, justifying the idea of rook c5. Now he has quite a bit of pressure on that pawn on the c4 square. All right, here, Vincent, he does go d4, gaining space and driving back that rook. Of course, the pawn on c4 is being supported by both the bishop on e2 and the rook on the c1 square. Where is the rook going to go? In the game, rook to a5 was chosen by Fabiano Caruana, attacking the pawn on a2. But of course, that is a very easy threat to parry. White goes rook c2, defending, and he is doing just fine once again. All right, now black goes bishop c6, getting his bishop out into the game, potentially setting up queen b7 ideas, exerting pressure on this long diagonal. Now here, white does castle on the king side. Castling kingside is the move, and now here, Fabiano, he plays another slightly inaccurate move. He comes down with the rook to a3. What is the idea behind this? I think he's trying to blockade that pawn on the a2 square, but overall, that wasn't really necessary. This pawn on b4 did block any sort of a3, a4 ideas from white, so rook to a3 may have been a wasted tempo, and instead of that, the computer prefers the idea of f5, maybe intending f4 very, very quickly for black. Now here, in this position, we are starting to resemble sort of a normal game in chess. After all, the white king has castled. All of white's pieces are essentially on typical squares here, whereas black's entire position here is just completely insane. All of these pieces are on very strange squares, and here Vincent Keymer finds a very powerful idea to immediately put maximum pressure on black's position. And if you like puzzles, pause the video right now and try to find the key idea for Vincent Keymer as white in this position. It's a very powerful idea that's often seen in classical chess. Here, Vincent, he goes for the Alpha Zero style attack with the move h4, intending h5, driving back that weak knight on the g6 square. What is black going to do about it? Well, in the game, bishop a4 was played. He ignores the threat of h5 and instead counterattacks on the rook on c2. Now, where is that rook going to go? Turns out it is going to c1, and this does give up the defense of the pawn on the a2 square for now. Black has the opportunity to capture it if he wants, and maybe this was the idea of rook to a3 played earlier, getting the rook on a3. That way you can go bishop a4 with the bishop behind the rook. That way you do maintain the attack on the pawn on a2. Now here, black goes a5, bolstering his pawn on b4, a perfectly fine move. But Vincent Keymer, he's not done with the Alpha Zero pawn, and he does go h5, driving back that knight immediately. Now, knight to e7 is virtually forced. I mean, every other square here, f4, h4, h8, e7, e5 and so on are being covered by the white pieces. Therefore, knight to e7 is virtually forced. Now white goes d5, clamping down on that pawn on d6, blockading that pawn and limiting black's options to get this knight into the game. For example, c6 is now not available as that pawn covers it. And again, look at all of black's pieces. I mean, his pieces are just on the most bizarre squares here, and everything in the white camp looks very, very normal, even for classical chess standards. All right, here black does win that pawn on the a2 square. That is his one saving grace. Rook takes a2 played in the game, and now black is technically up material, and he does have two protected passed pawns on the queen side. That is going to be his one chance to win this game. But of course, Vincent Keymer, if he can just get his counterplay going in the center of the board, he will be doing excellent. Now, Vincent, knight d4 is the move, a very strong square for that knight, eyeing both c6 and f5. Either of those squares could be very good for that knight. Now here, how does black want to continue? In the game, queen d7 was chosen, the idea being maybe you are guarding that f5 square, putting a little bit more pressure on that square. Instead, the computer says there are many other ideas, including the weird exchange sacrifice rook takes e2. I guess the idea being that rook will be lost sooner or later. The computer does love the idea of rook takes e2, but I'll let you investigate that on your own after this video. Instead, queen d7 was played in the game, guarding f5 with the queen and the knight. Now from here, white slides over the rook. Rook to a1 is the move, threatening the rook on the a2 square. What is black gonna do about it? He goes rook d2, sliding over with his rook, opting not to trade on the a1 square. And here white continues the alpha 0 attack with the move h6. Now what is the idea here? First of all, you are threatening h takes g7. That is a very, very real threat. Black is gonna have to find some way to deal with it. Beyond that, if you take on h6, you permanently damage all of your pawns on the king side. And even if you go g6, then white gets that permanent pass pawn on h6. That alpha 0 pass pawn could be very dangerous later in the game. All right, now in the game, g takes h6 was chosen by the American Grandmaster Fabiano Caruana, a decent move, but white is not done. He goes bishop h5, piling up pressure with the bishop, this being yet another idea of the alpha 0 advance h6, freeing up the h5 square for that bishop to target f7. And now simply bishop takes f7, trapping the rook on e8 is a very real threat. And what is black going to do about it? Here, Fabiano Caruana, he goes off the deep end and finds an absolutely insane idea. It is the strongest engine move, but this one is a total shocker. Here, he gives up the rook for the knight. Rook takes d4 was played in the game. Rook takes d4. What is the point? After c takes d4, then black can go bishop b3, targeting the weak pawn on c4. And overall, you were going to lose that rook on d2 sooner or later. Therefore, you are giving it up for the knight in order to damage white's pawn structure and counterattack against the pawn blob in the center of the board. But here, white simply goes queen d3, sliding back with the queen. He defends everything, knocks back that bishop, and where is the bishop going to go? Well, black can only go a4. That is about all there is left. He must push those pass pawns down the board on the queen side, and so far it looks like black is hanging on, but of course, white is going to have a number of ideas here in this position. Now, shockingly, white did not find or did not choose to play the option of simply bishop takes f7, winning the rook on the e8 square. I mean, that would be effectively game over on the spot. Instead, in the game, rook f to b1 was chosen. The point being, white is up so much not material, but his position is so dominant, he can actually afford to give up the rook for the bishop if he wants to. Now from here we have knight to c8, black retreats the knight, and of course white is in no rush to win the bishop on b3. He can always do that later if he wants to, so with that in mind, knight f1 is the move. The point being, you are intending knight d2, and that bishop will have nowhere to go. You can simply win it with the knight instead of the rook. Here Fabiano, b5 is the move. He tries to get some sort of counterplay going, but of course white can simply trade on b5 and win that pawn. C takes b5 played in the game, and Fabiano again, he's got to find some way to get counterplay. If he doesn't, he will simply get blown off the board. He continues queen to c7, maybe eyeing bishop c2 ideas, trying to fork the rook on b1 and the queen on the d3 square. Now white goes knight to e3, jumping up with the knight. Black goes knight to b6, and then we have rook c1, lining up the rook with the queen on c7. Now queen to b7, the queen slides over. Bishop f3 supports that pawn on e5. Of course, black is attacking it 1, 2, 3 times. White is only defending 1, 2 times, and that means black can technically win that pawn on f5. But if he does, for example, let's say he goes knight takes f5, that knight would be pinned to the queen on c7. Even that does not solve your problems here. Instead, f5 chosen in the game. Again, Fabiano trying to get something going somewhere, but white just picks up the free pawn. Queen takes f5, winning it on the spot. Black goes bishop g7. That was part of the idea of f6 play in the first place, for f5, sorry, freeing up this long diagonal for the bishop. But here white just goes queen to f4, dropping back, defending d4 with the queen, and threatening queen takes d6. That would win the pawn with check on the spot. That would be deadly. And what can black do about it? Here he is forced to go bishop f8, defending the pawn on d6, but white is not done. Rook to c6, flying up with the rook, threatening simply rook takes d6 potentially, or even rook a to c1, and then rook c7 ideas, piling up pressure on the 7th rank, and then threatening queen takes f7. I mean, white has so many different attacking ideas right here. It is going to be so hard for black to hang on. What can he do? In the game, Fabiano, he does not resign. He goes a3, pushing his a pawn down the board. That pawn is still a serious asset, but here Vincent Keymer, he plays the knockout blow. Rook takes d6 check, winning the pawn, and of course, if you take the rook, then you recapture the bishop, and you have an absolutely dominant position. For example, if bishop takes, queen takes, then if black tries to block with the queen, you pick up the knight, and instead, if you go knight d7, bishop g4 is coming. I mean, no matter what, white is just dominating. Instead, knight d7 chosen immediately by Fabiano Caruana, and here, Vincent Keymer, the final move of the game, rook to a6, a very strong move. The point being now, you are threatening d6 with the discovered attack of the bishop on the queen, and then you can go rook to a8, as the bishop on f3 would support that a8 square. I mean, Vincent Keymer playing an absolutely dominant game of freestyle chess against Fabiano Caruana. I believe the number 2 or 3 player in the world right now. This is just completely shocking. Vincent coming out of nowhere essentially to just dominate this tournament so far. And tomorrow he's going to play against Fabiano Caruana once again in their second game of the match. And if he gets at least a draw in that game, I believe he will be the winner of this tournament, unless I'm getting the rules wrong or something. That is my understanding right now. So very impressive stuff by Vincent Keymer in the Freestyle Chess Grand Slam tournament. We'll have to wait until tomorrow to see what happens. But until then, comment down below in terms of what you thought of this game. To me, this game was insane. Vincent is really showing his raw chess skill. It'll be interesting to see if his classical rating continues to rise. I believe he's around 27-31 right now, but I think after this kind of tournament, he may have potential to rise up a lot higher in the rankings. So very interesting stuff. Again, comment down below what you thought of this game. Smash that like button if you can. Helps me out a ton. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you want to see more action by Vincent Keymer from this tournament, check out this video right here where I cover yet another one of his best games from this tournament. And I'll see you in the next video.